Hi, everyone, and welcome to Rising Stories Podcast. I'm Corrine Sandifer, your host. I invite you to listen each week as we chat with business owners and authors about the dynamics of building and running a business and how these writers became published authors. We also delve into topics that we can all relate to, such as work-life balance, living with intention, and dreaming big. As these women share their stories with us, it's my hope that you will be encouraged to live out your own story. So please spread the word and tell a friend about this podcast. It's no surprise that I love podcasts myself because you can listen to them as you're sitting in traffic, walking your dog, or cooking dinner, or even working out. Wherever you are listening today, thank you so much for joining me on Rising Stories. Don't forget to find me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm at Corrine Sandifer on both Instagram and Twitter. Thanks to you, the listener, we now have a huge following, and we are super excited to extend an invitation to anyone who would like to participate in being a sponsor for Rising Stories Podcast. For more information, please send me an email at info@CorrineSandifer.com. My guest today is Ruta Sepetys. Ruta is a seeker of lost stories. Her first book, Between the Shades of Grey, is a New York Times bestseller and Carnegie Medal Finalist. She was the first American writer of young adult literature to speak at the European Parliament. Y'all, she is big time. I mean, she even has her own Wikipedia page, and we are so excited to have her here today. She now has 2 other books that she's written, which are Salt to the Sea and Out of the Easy. Ruta and I talk about her unique writing style as she writes for young adults, and we also talk about how the characters speak to her and stay with her even after the book has been written. You will love her explanation about this in the interview. I can't wait for you to hear her, so here is my conversation with Ruta. I've been practicing Sepetys. It almost sounds Italian. Is it not? Sepetys?
I know. People ask, is it Italian? Is it Greek? It's actually Lithuanian.
It's Lithuanian, and I knew that, but it just, when you say it, if you don't see it written out, I think that when I say it, it sounds Italian to me. Sepetys. Anyway.
Yep.
Well, tell me, I know about you because you came to my book club and we've been reading your books because you are a friend of a friend in my book club. But tell me about who you are and what you do.
Certainly. And first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. I am an author of historical fiction. I haven't always been an author. I was born and raised in Michigan and spent some time in Los Angeles. And I've always been a storyteller. I spent 22 years working in the music business and helping artists and musicians tell stories through music. And then about 10 years ago, I began telling my own stories. And that led me to writing several manuscripts and getting an agent. And now I am a full-time author of historical fiction. And I tell people that I'm primarily interested and drawn to stories of strength through struggle. I believe how we face our struggle, that means something, that there's meaning in hardship. Mm-hmm. So I look for underrepresented stories that contain those elements.
I love that word, underrepresented stories. Gosh, like we all know those. We all know.
I know.
We have them ourselves.
We all do. And what determines how, history or even our own personal history is preserved and recalled? Why are there some stories that are well known and others that remain hidden?
Mm-hmm. I was talking to a writer the other day and he said, my dad, he said, I write my books because my dad has a book that he kept in his nightstand and it never got published. It was never written. Oh. And I was like, oh, you've got to do his story too. And he's like,
absolutely.
He said that was his story and he never did it. And I'm like, oh, that's so inspiring because
it is so inspiring. And it's also so generous to tell your family member's story. Perhaps there was a reason, that they weren't able to tell their story. And so, the author that you had on, I really applaud them for doing that. I think that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. So what compelled you? What did you like, how did you first say, I'm going to write a book and it's going to be a historical fiction? Like,
It
what
it
started that
was
journey?
It was born of one simple question. As I was working in the music business, I would often ask people about their story. That was part of my process in helping songwriters and musicians come up with material for songs. And one day, one of the musicians turned the tables on me and said, "Well, Ruta, what's your story?" And my immediate response was that I'm Lithuanian. And he had no idea what that meant and momentarily thought that Lithuanian was an illness of some sort. And I explained, no, that Lithuania, was a country in Northern Europe. And this young man said that he had never seen Lithuania on a map. And to his point, for 50 years, Lithuania was not on a map. It was part of the Soviet Union.
Oh,
And
right.
and his simple question of, what's your story? It started me down this rabbit hole. And I never would have imagined that I would, be in this place today.
Right. And we forget that whole, country, the whole country just kind of got split apart. Is that what happened? And then now we have all these, Lithuania and all these different parts of what used to be Russia. Is that right? Am I saying that
Well,
correctly?
a little bit different. At the beginning of World War II, several countries were occupied by the Soviet Union.
Okay.
Countries like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, they were independent countries. They lost their independence, and the names of those countries were taken off the map. They were
Oh,
incorporated into the Soviet Union. They were not able to speak their own language. They were, instructed to speak Russian. And so it was a tremendous loss of independence. And many people, don't know that simply because the countries were considered part of the Soviet Union for so many years, but they were independent nations that lost their freedom.
okay. I get it now. Yeah, because I knew there was something where there was a takeover or release, but yeah, that's wow.
Yeah, and of course, if you want to occupy a country, you have to get rid of their military. And my grandfather was an officer in the Lithuanian military. So when Stalin occupied the country of Lithuania, my family found themselves on a deportation list. And so they escaped, my father and my grandparents, and they fled and spent time in Austria and 9 years in refugee camps in Germany until they were allowed to come to the United States.
And what year was that?
My father fled from Lithuania in 1940 and lived 9 years in refugee camps and came to the United States in 1949.
Oh, wow. So the lot was going on. A lot was going on during those times.
Yeah, during that time, obviously World War II, and there were over 12 million refugees during that time period.
Yeah. And so your books tell the story of a lot of the first one was Salt to the Sea. Is that no, I'm sorry. The first one was Between the Shades of Grey. That was your first book. That was
Correct. My
published.
first book was Between Shades of Grey, and that tells the story of a 15-year-old Lithuanian artist who's arrested with her mother and younger brother and deported to death camps in Siberia. And the story not only chronicles their fight to survive, but the fight to retain faith in mankind amidst the terror.
And it has become like a very well-known in the it's a young adult fiction book. And like for example, like my public library has like they just have all these books. Like they had a big like a book club. They were endorsing this book for young adults, and so you've won a lot of awards for this book too.
Much to my shock and, of course, my delight, the book is published in 53 countries and 36 languages, and I
Wow.
just can't believe it. I pinch myself every day, and that is, not something I can take credit for. Certainly my translators who translated the entire novel, they deserve the credit. And of course the readers. An author has nothing without readers. The readers are the ones who bring the book to life. And I'm so grateful because I'm a crossover author. My books are read by students and young people, but also, as you said, by adult book clubs. And that's where I
Yeah.
had the pleasure of meeting you. Yeah.
Yeah. And so these books are like, I don't know, they just speak to me. They're just
Oh.
so captivating, and I don't normally read. I mean, there's one person in our book club that always chooses a historical fiction novel, and it isn't my favorite genre, but I do love yours, and I think yours is in a place all its own because of just maybe it is because it's down to my level, little bit down to my level. I mean, it's not like it could certainly pass as just a regular adult fiction. I think. I don't think it.
Well,
You know.
in many countries it does. In Italy, for example, my books are not published for students or teens. They are adult novels. In Korea, in Brazil, and in many countries, I am an adult author. I do, though. I My writing style, if I can call it that, I do write in short sentences and short chapters. I want the material to be easily digestible for
Mhm.
young people and adults. These are heavy topics. When you tell
Yeah.
some people, "Oh, my book is about a Lithuanian girl who's fighting against totalitarianism in Siberia," it's a book for
Mm-hmm.
kids. You know, um, exactly. So you have to try to, I think, make it a bit more digestible.
Yeah. And they're so you've done your homework on these. Like you do all kinds of stuff because there are some just very detailed things that are happening. And how do you know this? Were these stories that were told to you and you're incorporating them, or did you just read them out
Well,
of a book, or what?
no, I spend 3 to 4 years researching each topic before I even begin to write. And my process is always pretty much the same. I will read all of the nonfiction that I can get my hands on that exists in the English language about a certain topic, as much as I can. Then my next step will be to travel to the place where the events occurred, not only to get a sense of the setting, but also to find people who perhaps experienced what I'm writing about. And that's when the story
Mm,
really comes to life through interviews with witnesses and survivors or family members of victims or survivors. And my books, they're historical, but I'm creating fictional characters and wrapping fictional characters around real events.
hmm hmm And so, for those of you all who don't know about historical fiction, it's kind of like what the Titanic movie was. They took two, characters, may or may not. I think there was only a couple of people on there, like I guess the unsinkable Molly Brown. Molly, is that her name? The
Oh,
lady who survived.
I
So,
can't
like,
even remember, but yes, I think that was her name.
yeah. So there's on, they were fictional characters, but they wrapped it around the sinking of the Titanic. So, anyway, that was just for those who are like, what does that mean, historical fiction? Because, the first time I heard it, I was like, what does that mean? Like, what?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. What does it mean, and how does someone blend fact and fiction, and where is it okay, and when is it okay to create something fictional? And for me personally, I insist on trying to stick to the actual dates that the events took place. I can't change and will not change the date of a battle or of an event or the city where it took place. No, for me, I keep it rooted in those facts, and for me, the fiction comes into play with the characters.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's. I don't know how you do it. How do you keep all the characters and what they're doing? How do you keep them all straight? Like, do you have a
This might
chart?
No, I don't keep a chart.
Okay.
I know some authors do, and every author has a different process, and there isn't a right way or a wrong way. But for me, uh, this might sound strange to your listeners, but when I'm writing a book, the characters feel so very real to me that even once I stop writing for the day, they're still living inside my mind. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking about what they're doing and would they do this and oh, and sometimes I can hear them speaking so clearly. And again, I know that sounds a little creepy, but perhaps it just indicates how immersed I become in my writing process.
Yeah, I have heard that from other authors. There was one that was like, a friend of mine who was writing, and she was like, "Oh, so and so died," and she's like crying that day. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, didn't you just write that? You made her die. She was like, "I know, but I didn't
Exactly.
know she was going to die." I'm like, "How do you not know she's going to die? You just wrote that." But
Oh
I
no,
get
that
it.
actually that's a very, very real and accurate statement. Sometime as you're writing, and this is my favorite part of the creative process, as you're writing, the story will suddenly take a different turn. And even if you have an
Mm.
outline, and even if you in your mind, you think you know where the story is going, suddenly you think, no, this is what's happening, and this character's going to die. And it is sort of a shocking moment, but it's also very exciting.
Yeah, that I would love to get into that world. Now, what would you have told yourself back when that person asked you, what about your story and you decided to write a book? How long ago was that? Was that several years ago?
Oh, it was many years ago. It was over 12 years ago.
Okay.
And what the person also said was that when I mentioned that I was Lithuanian, he said, well, what does it mean to be Lithuanian? And
Mm.
that was a very interesting question. I'm the daughter of a refugee. I have this very Lithuanian name. In Lithuanian, my name is Ruta Sepetys, and people here call me Ruta Sepetys. And for my entire life, people have been looking at my name and saying, "What is that?" And I'll say, "I'm Lithuanian." So it's very much a part of my identity personally. But I wanted a sense of what was the larger story here. I knew in my own family, or thought I knew, I should say, what it meant to be Lithuanian. But I wanted to share that with the world about Lithuania's struggle and their triumph, and the miraculous nature of the human spirit that these occupied Lithuanians experienced.
That is a mouthful. That's amazing that you were can tap into that. And I think I heard somewhere someone was saying she's like the ambassador to to all the Lithuanian people now because you're telling their story. You're telling
Oh, that
their
is so
meaning.
kind.
You're giving them
Well,
a place on the map, and you're giving them, meaning and just notoriety, and everybody knows now, like what, or not everybody, but the world is starting to read about it. Are there
Well,
other?
that's so kind of you, but I feel sometimes that I can't take credit, and maybe other historical novelists feel the same way because, I write the book, but it's not really my story. It's history's
Mhm.
story. And so sometimes it does feel, like I'm sort of in between. Yes, I'm creating the characters and creating somewhat of a plot, but really the story belongs to history and those who experienced it.
And I love how we were talking at book club this month that when we were talking about how you were saying that the readers, they come alive, these stories come alive because the readers are reading them and then they're connecting, I guess, with the characters and history. And so it does kind of.
Yes. That when young people, the history, sometimes young people tell me, oh, history's boring. But through characters and story, suddenly history becomes human and we can find the country on a map, and suddenly we care about a human being that we've never met. And I think that's the power of story and of books and of movies.
That's true. Yeah. I love a good movie and I love a good book. So what does Ruta do? Tell me a day in the life of Ruta Sepetys. What do you do?
A day in the life of Ruta Sepetys is different every single day. I thought that when I became an author, I had these grand ideas that I would just be sitting with my cup of tea, writing, and it was so romantic.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a lot of business in the world of an author, and so if I have my way, and I'm not on tour, if I'm not on tour, because then it's crazy. I'm flying, I'm doing events, but I try to wake up extremely early in the morning and get some good writing time in between, let's say, 5:30 and 9 in the morning, and then I will tackle emails and business calls with my various publishers around the world. Then I might do some Skype visits with schools. And then, of course, it's time to, prepare dinner for the family and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So, yeah, I try to get my writing time in the mornings. Now, if I have extended writing time, if I'm on deadline, I try to block out a couple of days because I find that uninterrupted writing time for me is the most productive. If I can actually go on a bender for 15 hours a day for a couple of days, that's really productive for me.
And do you have a place in your house that you particularly like to write in? Do you have an office, or do you just sit on the couch, or do you go all over?
It depends. If I'm on tour and I'm on deadline, then I might have to be in a window seat on Southwest Airlines writing. But
Mm-hmm.
generally, I have a writing room in my house where I write, and then we have a small family cabin out at the lake, and that is where I've really done, I think, my best work on my novels is out at the cabin. It's so quiet and it's completely away from everything, and it's really lovely.
Oh, that does sound like what I would imagine a writer would do. Go into a cabin, like with their tea, and so you do have that, I guess. I mean, and
I do when I can
sometimes,
squeeze those days out.
yeah,
Exactly, sometimes, but I'm so grateful for
yeah.
them.
But I know that it's like you've got a lot of answering the emails and calling people, maybe just getting your press releases out, I assume, and all those things that you have to do. What is there a certain app that you like to use or that's helpful?
Well, I rely heavily on the Google suite of not so much an app, but on the Google suite, I use so heavily the calendar and the drive for sharing, Google Forms. And so I rely on the Google suite quite heavily. And then inspiration wise, the app that I use a lot is my Sonos app that connects to my Sonos music system. Listening to music really helps me plot my stories. As I'm listening to music, I'll create a video in my mind, if you will, of with the characters, and that helps. I also use the Note app on my iPhone. When I'm driving, I'll turn on the voice recorder,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll just take notes and speak the story out loud. I'll speak the dialogue and I'll write out loud as I'm driving. The recorder's just running the entire time, and that really helps me make use of time in the car.
That's a great idea. Is that the app that it just records, or is it the Notes app that you hit the little icon, the microphone icon?
You can do either. I have found now that for me, what is more efficient is if I open up the Notes app and then I hit the voice record button,
Mm-hmm.
because then it's taking dictation and I can
Yes,
email that note to myself. And if I want to actually take a piece of text, some dialogue or narrative, and just
it's
drop it
already
right
written.
into, it's already written,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Wow. I know, it's just technology. Isn't it wonderful? You could just,
It
it's like a
It truly
secretary.
is. It truly is wonderful. But also, I think that for me personally, sometimes I just become absorbed in productivity versus presence. And as a writer, one of my greatest inspirations is solitude and quiet and presence. That's when I truly feel an alignment, and that's when I feel inspired. But we have all these wonderful tools that can make things, make ourselves so productive. But I have to try to balance that and also just have quiet time without technology.
Yeah. That's hard to do. We always keep our phones nearby, but that's really good. In fact, you just said that's my word for the year. I don't know if you do this, but I choose a word every year that sort of is either something that I'm wanting to do or wanting to incorporate in my life. Like last year was intentional, and the year before that was trust. So this year, my
Oh,
word is presence, or
oh, lovely.
present. So to be present, and it goes into, this is just kind of a side note, but it goes into like my closet. I'm thinking, I'm never going to wear that. I'm going to live in the now. I know some things I keep, but because I'm thinking, you never let go of your little jean jacket, whatever. But there are other pieces of clothing that I think I'm going to live in the now. I'm not wearing it. I'm just giving it away.
Good for you. I admire you so much for doing that. I wish I could do that.
It's hard to do. It's hard to do. But I'm trying to finding ways to incorporate that word presence and present into my life.
I love that.
So,
I love that.
well, Ruta, what 3 things are you absolutely loving these days? I want to know. I want to get in your brain.
Well, and the things that I'm loving, I have to say that these are things that have been referred to me by friends and colleagues. And something I'm loving these days is a program called The Balanced Life with Robin Long. One thing that is a challenge for me is finding time to exercise, and exercise in an efficient and meaningful way. And these are 10-minute workouts that Robin Long has put together, and you can find her online, The Balanced Life with Robin Long. And I find them so fantastic. 10 minutes, and each day focuses on, they're all core based. So let's say almost like a Pilates kind of exercise, but each day focuses on something else, upper body or legs, and they're not only difficult and challenging, but I find them really relaxing, and they only take 10 minutes. And I can always find 10 minutes, whether I'm in a hotel room, whether I'm at the cabin writing, whether I'm at home, I can always find 10 minutes. And so I've really enjoyed it.
I like that. 10 minutes. I can do that.
Yeah, that's something that I love. The other thing that I love is, and some people may have seen this a few years ago on Oprah's Favorite Things, is the Perfect Temp tea kettle. I love tea, and this electric kettle, makes it so easy. It has, I believe, 6 or 8 different settings to brew the perfect temperature for green tea, for white tea, for if you want to do French press coffee, and it saves so much time. And then when you heat it up, the kettle stays warm for a period, I think, of 30 to 45 minutes.
Oh, wow.
It keeps reheating, so it keeps the water at that temperature. And when I'm on a writing bender and going through, drinking tea, it's so helpful. So I love that.
That's really cool. Yeah, that it keeps going, that it keeps it warm enough. Yeah.
Yeah. And then one of my other favorite things is something that is a Nashville-based Tennessee company, is a company called 100% Italiano. This is a company that is run by Andrea Danti and Maria Pia Di Pasquale, and they are both from Italy, and they import small batch family, like handcrafted wines from Italy. And they visit every single vineyard and meet with the family that makes these wines. So, of course, there are lovely stories behind every single wine. And they not only make wines for people who are wine connoisseurs and collectors, but they also make, just wine that you can drink every day at the table. And I not only love them as people, but I love their wine. So, yeah, that's the 3 things.
It's called 100% Italiano, and it's just a company,
a wine distributor.
Yep. Where do you get them? Just at the store, just wherever wines are sold.
At the store, yes. And also they have different tasting events, but on their website, they show the different vineyards and the different families who are crafting the wines that they're importing and distributing, and you can get a feel. And they also have incredible people that work with them. If I'm having a dinner, for example, a bunch of authors over for dinner, I might email them and say, this is what I'm having for dinner. And they immediately email back suggestions of which wines to pair. And again, I am by no means a wine connoisseur. I drink wine rarely, but I really enjoy this unique approach that they have.
Yeah, I'll have to look them up, and I'll put the website on the show notes because I am totally interested in that. That sounds like something I need to buy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of Nashville, before I did want to ask you, because I ask everyone who lives in the Nashville area, what is your favorite Nashville restaurant?
My favorite Nashville restaurant is City House, and I love City House. And unfortunately, because I don't live up, I think it's in the Germantown area, because I don't live near there, I don't get to visit frequently, but that is sort of my special occasion restaurant, to go and have pizza at City House. I love it.
Do they have really good pizza? So is it an Italian place?
Well, I would call it fine dining. I mean, the chef there is just incredible. And they have two pizzas on the menu. One is the belly ham pizza that I love. It's my absolute favorite. So that's, such a treat for me to go eat at City House.
That sounds like fun. Yeah, I think one of my last guests mentioned City House. Maybe, I think. Anyway, I will have to look that up. I'm going to go. I need to make a plan to do that. And I'll have to try the pizza because I love pizza. There's several great pizza places here in town, but I'm always into looking for a good pizza.
Me too. Let's share.
Let's do it. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on. I feel like the time has just gone too fast. And like the other night when you were at our book club, I just could have just sat there and listened to you tell stories. But thank goodness you've got 3 books. You've got Between the Shades of Gray. You have, the next one was Out of the Easy. Is that your next one?
Correct.
And then Salt to the Sea, which is this last one that you just put out. When was that released? Salt to the Sea.
That was released a year ago.
Oh, okay. So our book club is late in doing that, but we did it. So yeah. So those are great. I'm super excited. I can't wait for the next one. Are you going to give us any hints? Are there any hints?
Yes, I'm hard at work. I'm hard at work on a new book, and it is set in Spain during the Franco dictatorship.
Oh, wow. Spain during the that's going to be good.
We know a lot about Hitler. We know a lot about Mussolini. We know some about Stalin. But what do we know about Francisco Franco? So I'm really enjoying writing this book.
Not a lot, but if you need a traveling companion, just call me up. I can do my podcast from Spain, lickety split, no problem. So, well, thanks, Ruta. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. I so appreciate it, and I'm grateful to all your listeners as well. Thanks for having me.
Didn't you just love her voice? I so enjoyed hearing about her writing room and her place at the lake where she writes. It's what I imagined, and she is such a great person, very authentic. I love reading her books. I know you will enjoy them too. So don't forget to check out the show notes. If you wanted to write something down but couldn't, no worries, because all the information about this show and other shows will be in the show notes at CorrineSandifer.com under Rising Stories Podcast. Also, don't forget to find me on Instagram and Twitter. And again, if you're interested in getting exposure for your business or your book, you can shoot me an email at info@CorrineSandifer.com. Thanks so much for listening, and keep rising in your own story.